And in the research that we performed, that I'll kind of talk about, we basically established 4 different points or 4 different key findings. The first finding that we were able to, put our finger on is that the geopolitical context is a driving force for all of these, or one of the driving forces for what we're seeing for this uptick. You'll see in a second how we did this and what we analyzed, but we do understand that there is a link between the geopolitics in the world, or what is happening in the geopolitical space, to the cybersecurity world. Second, there was some sort of adversary intent shift. Threat actors who maybe used to be financially motivated or now have different motives. Threat actors who used to operate on a specific type of framework now operate on another framework. And this interesting shift is also something that we took a look into. CyberInt essentially was founded with the goal of portraying to a customer or to an end client what an attacker can see from their perspective and from their standpoint, right? So we would simulate, or we would portray to an end customer everything that an attacker can do on their end. And then through this process, we were hoping to help them close the gaps before an attacker could actually utilize them and operationalize them. In 2024 and 2025, we saw that the most critical, the major industry vertical that has been exploited was government and water facilities, and then the rest when it comes to energy, healthcare, and transportation. In 2025, those groups are now kind of shifting to operate or to exploit energy utilities, and that includes also the space, but also the healthcare space. And maybe I'll kind of throw in a question for you guys and ask, can you maybe try and think why that is? Why maybe in 2025, what has changed in 2025 that makes threat actors more inclined to breach energy and healthcare facilities over government? This might be a shock. It was a shock to me, but still, in 2024 and in 2025, the best and most effective tool for threat actors to attack organizations is through valid accounts. This means that China, Russia, could spin up a very simple phishing campaign and direct it to your organization, and people will still fall for it. I think maybe this is a crazy thing for us to think about, because we're always talking about, phishing awareness, phishing detection, and still to this day, threat actors who sell credentials on the deep and dark web are probably the most common, threat actors and the most popular ones on the dark web. I'll show you an example in just one second. Government, and here they are trying to sell, and I'm going to read it for you, access to a server hosting Firewall and USA government missile defense contractor, and they're selling a root access to the server for the price of $800. So to me, as a threat actor, this is very, very easy to go and spend that extra $800 instead of building an entire operation to create or to obtain this initial access. All right, sounds good. Hey everyone, good morning. Glad y'all can make it. So today what we're gonna be talking about is, actually we're gonna be talking about a lot of things. When I first started to create this or to prepare this presentation, I was thinking about one avenue, and then as I was building the presentation, I was like, okay, that could be interesting to include as well. So you'll hear a lot of topics today. Hopefully they will all kind of boil together and make sense at the end. But the premise to this talk is going to be everything that's going to be external or beyond the firewall, right? And specifically in the essence of, or in the notion of the geopolitical context. 2024 and 2025 were pivotal, I'd say, years in cybersecurity. And the goal of this session is maybe going to be to talk a little bit about that, understand why that is, what are those changes that we're seeing, and maybe a little bit at the end, what are the action items that we can take to make this a little bit more practical. A little bit about myself. So I was born and raised in Israel. When I turned 18, Israel has a mandatory military service. I joined Unit 8200. I don't know if that means anything to anyone in the room, but it's the intelligence unit of Israel. where a lot of cybersecurity startups kind of grow and evolve. Spent there 4 years and then joined a very small startup company called CyberInt. And CyberInt essentially was founded with the goal of portraying to a customer or to an end client what an attacker can see from their perspective and from their standpoint, right? So we would simulate or we would portray to an end customer everything that an attacker can do on their end. And then through this process, we were hoping to help them close the gaps before an attacker could actually utilize them and operationalize them. I was there for about 6 years, and then about a year and a half ago, this startup company grew and grew, and we got acquired by Checkpoint. And I think we were the 29th acquisition of Checkpoint. We were then very, very happy and thought we were going to be the sexiest and shiniest toy, but then very, very fast, 3 months later, another startup came into the family, and then they stole our thunder a little bit. But we're nowadays working together in one unified product. I'm not going to talk about that. What I do today at CyberInt is I'm part of the Office of the CTO, so part of our cybersecurity evangelists who do these types of research, talk to people like you guys to promote this research forward. And also on top of that, I'm part of our solution engineering group, working with ongoing prospects and customers. So that was a little bit about myself. And now I have a question for you. And I know that's a very vague question, so kind of roll with it a little bit. And the question is, if we take into consideration, or if we think about attackers versus entities in the US or in Canada, so let's just kind of put a sticker or a label to it, call it North America, who is winning? And I know it's a vague question, but if you think about, if I kind of break it down a little bit, who is maybe faster, who's smarter, who is more proficient in terms of cybersecurity, tool set, skills? What do you think? Do you think that Canada, US entities are smarter, or are the attackers smarter?
Attackers.
Why?
Like, I'm taking into account all the medium small as well as well. They don't portray like figure to cybersecurity as the enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And just the balance of that shifts over the attackers when they are little to the cybersecurity matters at maximum of the conflicts.
Okay, that's a great answer. So we have one attackers who thinks otherwise.
Okay. I think the same, but maybe for a different reason. I think attackers have the incentive, and the defenders are automatically reactionary to whatever the attackers come up with. So maybe that's what.
Oh, they're going to bring you a mic. Do you want to repeat that real quick?
Sorry, yeah, I just think I would support the view that the attackers are winning, a bigger incentive, and the defenders are reactive.
Okay.
My impression, at least.
Go ahead, yes.
Yeah.
So I just want to add one point is that even big organizations like, government and bank, they are too big. They have too many risk landscape and threat landscape, right? Open too. So, if one thing get weak and broken, then the whole thing get broken.
Okay, interesting. Any other thoughts? Who thinks that we're better, the defenders? Nobody. That's kind of, not news that I'd like to hear. But unfortunately, dear CISOs, you are right. So the map that you're seeing right now is a map that is showing across the US and Canada the amount of attacks, and there are different types of attacks that we're measuring, but the amount of attacks that have occurred in the US and in Canada in 2025 only. So, and more specifically, I'd say that not only the fact that these attacks happened in the United States and Canada in 2025, the targeted organizations that you see within this map are critical infrastructure or government-related entities. So this alone should tell you that the attackers are unfortunately winning, right? It's a numbers game. And maybe in this session, we'll try to understand why that is, what has changed, because if I showed you that map maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it would be half of the points. Half these points would be gone. So the only thing that we can see is that there is an uptick in the amount of attacks. And now this has triggered, in our group at Checkpoint, a research question as per why that is. Let's try and understand that. And that's what we're going to do within this session. There was a question there?
I just want to ask if the map you're showing, is it within reported on, or are you capturing non-reported as well?
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually. So it's a combination. Within Cyberint or Checkpoint, we have a lot of ways to detect, traffic that is happening, whether it's reported or not reported. We have sensors globally to, detect and analyze these activities. So some of the events that you're seeing here are, reported. You're gonna go to, the attacks against water utilities in the United States that happened in 2024. That's going to be documented, and there's maybe even one example in this presentation for it. But many of the other attacks or many of the other incidents that are reported within this map are not reported or not publicly accessible. That's why we're, there's no names here or anything like that, just the standpoints on the map. All right, so, and if we kind of talk about this number here, so we have 57, I don't know if you can read it, but I'll tell you what it reads. 57% out of the critical infrastructure government entities have been attacked across the US and Canada. This means that this is more than 1 in 2 entities is being attacked, or more than 50%. And that is, for lack of a better term, obscene in how crazy that is. And if you think about it, these are all the critical infrastructure, the government entities. They contain all of our data, our critical infrastructure, the water we drink, the buses we take. And again, the only reason that this is interesting for us is because in 2024 and 2025, we saw a crazy uptick of more than maybe 200% in that number. So let's try and analyze and understand why that is. And in the research that we performed, that I'll kind of talk about, we basically established 4 different points, or 4 different key findings. The first finding that we were able to, put our finger on is that the geopolitical context is a driving force for all of these, or one of the driving forces for what we're seeing for this uptick. You'll see in a second how we did this and what we analyzed, but we do understand that there is a link between the geopolitics in the world, or what is happening in the geopolitical space, to the cybersecurity world. Second, there was some sort of adversary intent shift. Threat actors who maybe used to be financially motivated or now have different motives. Threat actors who used to operate on a specific type of framework now operate on another framework. And this interesting shift is also something that we took a look into. Third thing is that the attack surface has expanded. So many people talk about today about space as one of the newest attack surfaces. And this is also something that we took a look into and try to understand a little bit, what are the new attack vectors or what are the new spaces that threat actors operate in? And then lastly, even within the same realm of utilities skill sets that have been used by the attackers, there has been a significant development, and kind of, I will say in advance, kind of a warning, I don't think there could be a presentation, at least in forums like this, that is not going to include the word AI in it 700 times. So this last part will talk about AI as an operationalized or as an accelerator for all of the tradecrafts that we have already been seeing. Okay, so starting off with the first thing, the geopolitical context. What you're seeing in this graph is the red graph, or the red line here, trend, is basically showing the GPR index, or geopolitical risk index, in the world from 2010 to 2025. And let's just say, if we kind of, view it in 2 different segments, I see 2 main segments of upticks. I see one kind of trend from, let's say, 2010 and 16. And then I see another trend starting from 2021. I don't know if you can see that. Now, what we did is we took that geopolitical risk index and we tried to compare it with the amount of attacks that we're seeing across US and Canada entities, specifically in government and critical infrastructure related entities. And what we can see is that there is a correlation between the geopolitical risk index to the amount of attacks that we are seeing. So again, if you look at the time from 2010 and 2015, there is a certain uptick in the GPR index, and there was also an uptick in the number of attacks. And yet again, in 2021, there was an uptick in the GPR index, and there was an uptick in the amount of attacks, which is the blue or black graph that you're seeing here. So there's some sort of a connection between how risky the world is versus how many attacks or how incentivized are attackers to perform cyber operations. And this led us to think that there was maybe some sort of an intent shift. So why is it that geopolitical risk pushes or makes threat actors more inclined to perform cyber operations? And we took all the attackers, or a lot of the attackers that we were familiar with, and kind of divided them into groups. We divided them into groups by first of all, by their association, whether they're state-sponsored groups, whether they are ransomware groups, whether they are financially motivated. We kind of divided them into the groups that identifies them the best. And then we tried to put, or to kind of draw this classification matrix that's combined of two axes. The first axis, or the horizontal one, is the financial versus ideology, or the motive axis. So what is the motive of the threat actor? What do they want to achieve at the end of the day? Do they want money, or are they ideology motivated? These actors operate differently in the attack scenarios and the attack frameworks that they're using. And we try to understand if there was some sort of a shift in the amount of threat actors who maybe once were financially motivated and now are motivated differently. And the vertical axis is the kind of way of operation. If you think about it, threat actors back in 2020 were all about fame. They try to go as big as they can with any particular breach that they could potentially, exploit, right? Whether this is any, large enterprise or a large government facility or a large government office, they would try to go as big as possible in terms of the PR, in terms of the public appearance, because this was part of the game, to try to assert maybe force or dominance or show, who's better, who's more advanced. And we try to take the threat actors that we knew and then place them in the different quadrants according to how they're motivated, and then what is their ways of operation. Do they go public? Do they go big in announcing every breach that they can? Or are they subtle? Are they kind of silent and try to, what we call essentially pre-position within a specific organization to kind of stay within the network or stay within the enterprise that they're exploiting in order to breach it or to operationalize it when they can. And we were able to see two main trends compared to previous years. So what you're seeing is a 2024, 2025 matrix, and the trends that I'll show you right now are going to be the difference between 24, 25 and previous years. Let's just say starting from 2020. So there are two main trends. First trend is that we're seeing that threat actors move from being financially motivated to ideology motivated. Threat actors who we knew that were once all about the money are now breaching entities that are, for lack of a better term, poor, or that they know for a fact that they cannot pay a certain ransom fee for. And this poses a very interesting question, because if you're financially motivated, if you're all about the money, why would you go and breach a school district that you know for a fact that cannot pay you the money that you want if you were to breach, a very large enterprise company that can possibly pay you the ransom fee? So many of the attackers move from being financially motivated to being ideologically motivated. So that's an interesting thought. And the other thing is that threat actors move from being more disruptive, aka going public with their breaches or using tools, techniques that will make headlines, to being more subtle and doing their operations way more silently. This means that they will try to breach an organization and not to announce it, or stay within the network, stay within the within this organization for a very long period of time, until the moment that they feel that it's right for them. But what does right for them mean? So if you look at the groups that are kind of within this top right quadrant, again, you can't see because it's a little small, but I'll show you that, or I'll tell you that the vast majority of the groups that are in this quadrant are red coded or color coded for red, and are color coded for orange. And those groups are, interestingly enough, groups that are known to be state-sponsored and linked specifically to Russia and China. So state groups are now being more, or other threat actors that are related to China and Russia are now being more ideologically motivated, and also are being more subtle and more silent about their cyber operations in comparison to previous years. Okay. And just to maybe show you or talk a little bit about the changes again that we're seeing from 2024 and 2025. In 2024 and 2025, we saw that the most critical, the major industry vertical that has been exploited was government and water facilities, and then the rest when it comes to energy, healthcare, and transportation. In 2025, those groups are now kind of shifting to operate or to exploit energy utilities, and that includes also the space, but also the healthcare space. And maybe I'll kind of throw in a question for you guys and ask, can you maybe try and think why that is? Why maybe in 2025, what has changed in 2025 that makes threat actors more inclined to breach energy and healthcare facilities over government? Incentive to pay? That's one thing, that's true. The healthcare space and maybe the energy space can pay way better than your local DMV, I do agree. But what else?
Maybe influencing government through impacting the people.
Bingo. So if you think about it, the government requires energy to operate, right? They need electricity. They need any other energy facility. The kind of the base layer of our maybe society, of our market, is going to be energy and healthcare. And on top of that, anything that's on top of that is on top of that, right? Whether this is the government that are requiring the energy and the healthcare for themselves as well, or any other layers of, how our market works. So threat actors have understood that instead of targeting a government entity, they can target an energy utility that the government needs to operate. And through this kind of third-party targeting, they could also target many other entities, and the public effect of this threat is going to be way more extreme than targeting a specific entity. Think about it. If the power goes out right now, not only CyberX CISO forum is going to be affected, but maybe all the city of Toronto. That includes also all the public transportation. This includes the water facilities. That includes the government facilities, or the city hall that's right here, right? So they understood that they can operationalize this tradecraft and target a lot more people or entities through targeting the base and the most important layers of our maybe society or market. And here what you can look at is how inclined are threat actors to target a specific industry vertical. So it's kind of a heat map that takes all of the threat actors groups that we saw within the matrix that you've seen a second ago, and tries to understand what is the likelihood of that group to target that particular industry vertical. So if we take a look here, the top ones are PRC linked, so People's Republic of China, and then Russia linked actors. And we see that they're very heavy on targeting government entities. Interestingly enough, PRC-linked actors are also very big on targeting the space, space-related entities, and you'll see an example in a few slides from here. Ransomware groups are very heavy on targeting healthcare because, again, ransomware groups are trying to earn as much as possible. They're the group that's maybe highly financially motivated, and the best payer is probably the healthcare institutions because they have a lot of money to an extent, and they harbor a lot of information that maybe kind of poses legal and financial risks if they just let this information go out and be sold out there. So this matrix also was able to help us understand a little bit what are the affiliations of these threat actors and why are they targeting the same entities or the same the industry verticals that we have been seeing that were targeted the most in 2024 and 2025. So our biggest players here that we're talking about essentially are state-sponsored groups, and specifically the ones related to Russia and the ones related to China. And then if we want to talk a little bit about the operational tradecraft shift, so what makes threat actors or how do these threat actors operate on a day-to-day basis or a day-to-day level, we try to analyze from our database of attacks that we have access to. We try to analyze and understand what are the techniques, the MITRE attack techniques that are used in any one of these attacks, and we try to kind of create a summary or to create a frequency matrix to show what are the attacks that are, or what are the tools that are being most heavily used. And this might be a shock. It was a shock to me, but still in 2024 and in 2025, the best and most effective tool for threat actors to attack organizations is through valid accounts. This means that China, Russia, could spin up a very simple phishing campaign and direct it to your organization, and people will still fall for it. I think maybe this is a crazy thing for us to think about because we're always talking about, phishing awareness, phishing detection, and still to this day, threat actors who sell credentials on the deep and dark web are probably the most common, threat actors and the most popular ones on the dark web. I'll show you an example in just 1 second. So what I want to do is I want to maybe kind of drill down a little bit on how the threat actors take valid accounts or take these few techniques that you see here and how do they operationalize them. What you're looking at here is essentially the top targeted industries by initial access brokers. Initial access brokers are brokers who go ahead and sell credentials for other threat actors to use in these types of attacks. And so if I am, for example, a threat actor who wants to breach the municipality of Toronto, I don't know if that entity exists, by the way. Does it? Okay, the city of Toronto, thank you. So the city of Toronto, instead of working my way up and trying to find vulnerabilities that are within the perimeter of the city of Toronto, trying to maybe create a phishing email or a phishing campaign by myself, directing it to the employees of Toronto, of the city of Toronto, without, having to invest all this effort, I could go into the deep and dark web and buy credentials out from someone who's already done that work for me. I don't really care how, I don't really care, how, when or what, but I can pay as little as maybe $10 or $20 for a pair of credentials that is known, or an initial access as we call it, that is known to work for the entity that I'm trying to target. And then through this process, I can spare myself the headache and the maybe skills that are required to perform such action. So these people who sell that type of credentials are called initial access brokers. And you can see in the trend here that we try to analyze and see what are the entities or what are the industries that were most affected by it. So if we take, for example, in the deep and dark web, all of the entries that are trying to sell initial access for organizations and distribute them by the sector, what are the sectors that are most heavy on initial access brokers? And what we found was that government, healthcare, and education are the ones that contain the biggest propensity of initial access brokers. So this means that these entities, government, healthcare, are going to be highly affected by the fact that, or are highly targeted, and then in turn going to be highly affected by other threat actors operationalizing that information and then targeting them in turn. And maybe to show you what that looks like. So let's just start with maybe the right image here. The right image is an image from the deep and dark web where we were able to show, and this is a very kind of known threat actor who's selling a lot of initial access links to sellers. Specifically, they operate or they focus on realms associated with critical infrastructure, government. And here they are trying to sell, and I'm going to read it for you, access to a server hosting Firewall in USA government missile defense contractor. And they're selling a root access to the server for the price of $800. So to me, as a threat actor, this is very, very easy to go and spend that extra $800 instead of building an entire operation to create or to obtain this initial access. Another example here of a school district in the United States that was breached a couple months ago, we were able to see exactly the fact that they have been breached through an initial access that was in the form of malware logs, essentially info stealers that were installed on the endpoints of employees and students. And through this process, the threat actor who did this was able to sell that information and then was able to, first make a profit out of it, but for the entity who bought it, they were able to then very easily breach that school district without too much effort. The example that you see here, and maybe this is a representation of what we spoke about, the fact that space is maybe now a new kind of entity or a new world for threat actors. And as a matter of fact, space, we're talking a lot about space and a lot about threat actors targeting space in 2025, but it's not really a very new field or a very new world. Threat actors, and especially the ones linked to the People's Republic of China, have been trying and succeeding in exploiting space entities for quite some time. Here what you can see is a threat actor that is trying to offer initial access for a space entity. So it reads, government entity, major space agency in the West with access to sensitive government networks. This was obviously translated to English from Chinese. They're offering the initial access for $15,000, which sounds maybe a lot for us, but if you think about it again, what are the skills that I need to have in order to get to the same point? It's a very low price to pay for the type of data that I could be getting from this process. And for the last bit of the research, I promised that we have to talk about AI and AI operationalization. So I think one of the biggest things that are, it's not me. One of the biggest things that allow many of these things to happen, the initial access brokers, the targeting of space, and all the trends that we're seeing, threat actors moving from being financially motivated to ideologically motivated, the stealth that these threat actors have, what allows it to happen is, by a lot of means, the operationalization or advancements in AI. What you maybe see here in the left-hand side are early versions of how attack tools that are AI-based have worked. It started with kind of unconsolidated AI tools that did certain parts of the attack chain. And we're very fast advancing into an era where AI agents and AI orchestration layers are able to orchestrate attacks from A to Z. What you see on the right-hand side is an image of another research that we did on the topic, where there was a tool that was launched for red teams to perform attack simulations. So defense teams to perform attack simulations on their networks, on their entities, very, very fast, even before the defenders even could understand what or how to work it. Threat actors were able to launch it or to use it, and more than that, they were able to kind of exploit vulnerabilities that were launched or released to very critical Cisco products at that same week when that feature, when that tool was launched. So threat actors are moving very, very fast. And this is, again, the fact that they are able to do all these things that I've just described in the presentation is due to the fact that the AI usability and understanding of attacks is advancing really, really fast. And maybe just to show you two examples of how this works, and then I'll leave some time for questions. We were working on I'll show you two different examples of how AI is being used. One of them is in the last months in the United States, we have been receiving constantly, to the extent of maybe 2 SMS messages a day, these SMS messages that are saying, hey, you need to click this link to pay $5 if you don't want to get your license suspended. And then you'd be redirected to a page that looks exactly like the DMV of the state that you are in, and you'll be required essentially to pay a certain amount of money. Of course, this entire operation that was really in great detail, very, very, very similar to the designs of the actual DMV websites, the SMS messages that are sent by the DMVs, were obviously orchestrated by AI and conducted by groups that are linked to the People's Republic of China. We were able to analyze a lot of the samples and see that many of them were used or built using AI toolkits for the phishing operationalization. And this was a great example to how AI can help these actors and how they work very hard in implementing it in their day-to-day operations. The other example here that I'd like to show you is another, maybe a little bit even more sad example, where threat actors essentially built campaigns imitating or impersonating actual physicians, healthcare providers in the United States, in Canada, and very heavily also in Europe, to try and sell to people fake GLP-1 drugs. In a later keynote session today, I'll be talking more about that and about how we were able to, see this type of information. What does that mean? But essentially, if you think about it, you'll scroll on social media and then you'll see a post offering you GLP-1 medications. You will go on a Zoom call with someone who claims to be an actual doctor who will allegedly prescribe your prescription, and then will send you over to this web page to kind of offer you a discounted price GLP-1 products. Many of the people who went ahead and bought these products ended up in emergency rooms, ended up in having to go through some medical procedures due to consumption of these types of goods. So, and this is another example how threat actors use AI to create deepfakes to strengthen or up their game in the context of how they can, cause more harm to the entities that they're targeting. These groups, and I'm kind of spoiling it for you, these groups were also found to be state-sponsored and linked to kind of more Eastern countries. And this is, if you think about it, a little bit where the lines between cyber threats and physical threats blur, right? So this is why this was, for example, very interesting for us to look into, and I'll be talking about that more in a later session today. All right, so I think we have about 5 minutes left, so I'll kind of open this for any questions or comments. Yes, go ahead.
What we personally are experiencing is vishing. Basically, there are a lot of videos out there for CEOs and other SLT members which has been used to train the AI models, and they end up calling the IT help desk or the users, the actual branch managers, and asking them to basically do the nefarious activities. That's what we have seen in our environment.
That's so interesting.
there-
So what do you do against it? What do you do about it?
So we basically, first of all, we have asked that no. First is the training, right? The user training is we are investing heavily on it, and basically we are making sure that anything which is flagged out there in our environment, we send a mail from our CISO or CIO to make sure that everyone is aware of what is happening. First is the awareness piece, right? Second is we have tools to, if they are on the corporate systems and not on their phones, basically if they're not sending an SMS to, get through that, but if they're on the systems itself, we have elaborate number of threat intelligence feeds coming in, and we are using our SSE product to enforce those so that they're not going to these malicious websites to make sure that, so we have seen our Okta pages being imitated by the threat actors, and this is what is happening. So we are using a combination of, awareness as well as fine-tuning of our SSE products.
Interesting. And let me just ask you another question. Are you using in your stack currently any AI enhancement tools to counter these attacks that I'm assuming also, from what you're describing, are also based off of AI?
Not to a extent that we would be comfortable with it. But yeah, we have some threat intelligence feed, which is basically, so we use a SIEM tool. We have a threat intelligence kind of a AI product sitting on top of it, and if it sees certain types of threat actors that we have, threat vectors that we have it trained on, it sends the connection back to our firewalls and the SSE product to block them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you do have some sort of a connection.
Some sort of, but
feedback
not,
loop.
Yeah, not where I would say we are 100% foolproof. But yeah, we have something, we are leading there. But yeah, but I don't know how protected we are there. But yeah, this is happening and it is very prevalent, and yeah, it's ongoing. Strategy is changing every day. We have been on the heightened security checks on our multiple assets that we have. But yeah, it is happening.
I bet. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, a quick question. So I kind of came into the session thinking geolocation. Is it like a quick band-aid fix to just block traffic from those Eastern threat actors, or is that not gonna cover it? Or maybe it was a thing 5 years ago, but today it won't anymore.
Yeah,
I mean,
can tell you that
if I see traffic from Amsterdam,
yeah, just block
who knows what's actually using it, right?
So I can tell you that.
I would like to add there. So because we are governed by OFSI, we are a financial institution, right? So we Office of Superintendent of Financial Services in Canada, basically. So we have all these. If the destination server is sitting in Russia, China, or anywhere, we have that blocked on our firewalls, on our SSE product, and it is being updated by multiple threat intel feeds as well. But we are seeing those servers are being spun up in AWS US. So
exactly. So
that's where the elevation happens in the threat. Yeah.
So this is exactly what I was about to say. So and I'll just give the example of the research that we did with the DMVs, right? We were able to find that a lot of the infrastructure that are hosting many of these DMV-like web pages were hosted in resources that was very easy for us to correlate to China, right? What we did is work with the states to massively block all of these IOCs, all of these entities, so that even if you're a citizen and you're receiving this SMS and you're clicking thinking, oh, I need to pay, you click and then you get to nowhere, right? So this alleviates some of that pressure. But just like the comment that was made here, it's not always the fact that threat actors keep the resources in a place that's going to be very easy for us to point and say, let's just block this geolocation, right? It's so easy and so cheap to now buy or host your resources in AWS, where it will make our lives way, way harder to detect. That's why a lot of our detection capabilities are not specifically isolated to IOCs and infrastructure and the metadata, but also the content itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but we use a lot of AI capabilities to detect these, these instances. And so we kind of try to help with countering AI activities with other AI activities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the game has changed.
Yeah.
It has surely changed. And personally, I feel the zero trust model is 99% foolproof at this point of time.
Yeah, I agree. All right. I think we're at the time. So thank you so much for coming and listening.